Hello, welcome to my watercolour demonstration, Sunset at East Hardwick. So today I'm going to be painting this picture at the bottom here. This was taken a good number of years ago, and I have painted it before a few times. This was the first one I did, which is in one of my sketchbooks, and I can see on the date here it was painted on the 16th of August 1995. That's 25 years ago. Well, I'm not going to do any drawing. I'm working on a small sketchbook, watercolour sketchbook. It's a £140 weight paper. It's taped down with some framing tape, which is similar to masking tape, just a little bit stickier. Not going to do any drawing, just going to go straight into the painting. I've mixed some colours, and the colours I'm using today are cadmium red pale or cadmium red light, which is very similar to vermilion. That would do instead, or ordinary cadmium red, a little bit darker, that would do. Cadmium yellow, burnt sienna, which is a lovely golden brown, orangey brown, and this is called quinacridone violet, which is better known as permanent rose. It has other names as well, very similar to quinacridone rose, quinacridone red. They're all very similar, better known as permanent rose. And last of all, I've got Winsor blue green shade. There's Winsor blue green shade and Winsor blue red shade. Well, Winsor & Newton used to make just Winsor blue, and then they thought we could make more money if we have a red shade and a green shade. And so the new Winsor blue green shade is the old Winsor blue. It's also known as phthalocyanine blue, or phthalo blue for short, PHTHALO. And in the Winsor & Newton student range, they call it intense blue. The SAA call it tropical phthalo blue. It's brighter than Prussian blue, and one of my favourite colours. Well, I've mixed my colours in the palette here, and here I've got the cadmium red pale mixed with cadmium yellow, and here I've got permanent rose with a little bit of cadmium yellow. Over on the other side, just on the edge here, there's the same mix as that, but it's stronger, so there's more paint in that, a little less water. Here is just cadmium yellow on its own, and here is the Winsor blue green shade, or the phthalo blue, mixed with a little bit of the permanent rose. So I'm going to test those colours first of all. I've got a little bit of scrap paper here, and I'm going to test them on wet paper, because when I paint my picture, I'm going to paint it on wet paper, wet paint on wet paper. That's called wet in wet. And so I'll just do like a mini version on here to test the strength of the colours, because watercolour always dries a little bit lighter. So when you do this, just use a small brush, and then you won't use up all your colours, all your paint that you've mixed. So here's the blue. Stir it all up, because the pigment can settle at the bottom. Right up at the top there. Backwards and forwards. Then I'll get rid of some onto the kitchen roll, and then just use what's on the brush. So working at an angle, that as that runs down, it gets paler and paler because it's mixing with the water that's on the paper. Then wash the brush thoroughly and dip into the redder orange. That's the permanent rose with a tiny bit of cadmium yellow to it. Start this underneath, but then come up into the blue where it's pale in the middle, and then just come back down again, working at a slight angle like that. Might just go over that up a bit, a little bit more, just bring that down a touch. So what I'm trying to do is to get those two colours just to mingle very gently together, but keep it pale where they meet. And then underneath that, the orange, so that was the cadmium yellow with a little bit of cadmium red added to it. And when I do my main picture, I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap in the middle, and just at the bottom here, stronger orange. orange, and then blend that in a little bit. And when I do my main picture, I want to keep, where the sun is, I want to keep that really, really pale. So I'll just put a tiny bit of yellow in there, not very watery. But that's just to test the strength of the colours, and I think those colours are fine. And the other thing I will be doing, just before that has a chance to dry, is with a flat brush, I'll lift out some of the colour. And when you do that, it's important not to use a watery brush, a brush with water on it, but a damp brush. Because if you use a brush with water on it, then it'll, as the water hits that, it'll kind of explode and cause a cauliflower. So very important not to have a very wet brush. This is for the silvery clouds, which will be above the sun. So I'm quite happy with those colours. So make sure you've got clean water and clean brushes, and I'm working at a slight angle. And when you start, take your phone off the hook, you put do not disturb on the door, and you mustn't stop this once you've started. So I'm going to wet the paper about 3/5 or so of the way down, much more sky than land, and just at the bottom in the middle, just with a piece of kitchen roll, just lift a bit of the water out. So that's where the sun's going to go. Make sure the kitchen roll's clean, and then I'd use at least a size 10 brush for most of this, and try and do this as quickly as you can. So backwards and forwards, bring that down about halfway down your sky area or so. Then get rid of what's on your brush, give your brush a good bash, get rid of the water onto some kitchen roll, and then dip into the redder orange and just put this underneath to start with. Get rid of what's on your brush, and now come up into the weak blue and then back down again. So where those colours meet, you're stirring them up, mixing them together a little bit, and then wash your brush, then into the yellower orange, and stir that up with the redder orange. Stir that up, and then where the paint ends, where the end of the wet paint is, I'll drop in some of the stronger orange now, right at the bottom there, on both sides, going around the sun. Mop up what's on the brush, get rid of what's on the brush rather, and just encourage that to mingle a little bit. A little bit more of that stronger orange. Right at the bottom there. And working at an angle, all that paint's just come down, so you need to be careful not to have it too wet. It wants to be wet enough, but not over wet. Stronger colour right at the bottom there. And immediately around the sun, I'm going to use a smaller brush now. Smaller brush and a little bit of that yellow. That's just the cadmium yellow on its own, making a little sort of semicircular shape, and just encourage that yellow with a damp brush rather than a wet brush, encouraging it to mingle with the other orange. Maybe just a touch more orange. I want those just to melt into each other, but I don't want a hard edge where the yellow meets the white of the paper. So with clean water, just get rid of that hard edge by tickling the edge, a damp brush, and creating that semicircular shape, slightly curved. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect because we've got lots of grasses to go in front of all this once this is dried. So, but I also need to be fairly quick. I don't want to spend too long doing this because I want to lift out some of those silvery clouds with my flat brush. So, flat brush, damp flat brush, just gentle angle, get rid of what's on the brush, onto some kitchen roll, being careful not to use a wet brush. Remember, if you've got water on the brush, it's just going to wash the paint off and create what we call a cauliflower. Now, because the paper's wet, some of this colour might keep on rushing into, might keep on spreading into the areas that I'm revealing, where I'm lifting the colour off. So you might just need to do that a few times, go over it a few times to keep removing the colour. Get rid of it onto a piece of tissue and I've got these at a slight angle. Perhaps you just need to be a little bit careful not to make them too stripy, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 identical stripes, but perhaps have a few little clouds as well as the bigger ones. So that's looking okay. How much to do? That's always a difficult one. I think that's probably enough now. So I'll let that dry, and once that's dry, and we can work on the lower part of the picture in part 2 of Sunset at East Hardwick. See you then.